The October rain fell softly on Florence's terracotta rooftops, turning Via dei Serrali's cobblestones dark and slick. Inside Caffè Dolce Mattina, Isabella Costa wiped down the wooden counter, her movements automatic. 8 months in Italy, and the rhythm of cafe life had become second nature for the 26-year-old Brazilian. "Bella, you're going to wear a hole through my counter," Sofia Benedetti called from the kitchen, her gray hair escaping its bun. Isabella smiled, tucking a strand of long brown hair behind her ear. "Sorry, Sophia. The dreams again." The dreams had started 3 weeks ago. Vivid memories of places she'd never been. A villa with cypress trees, marble floors beneath bare feet, and always a piano melody carved into her bones, though she'd never heard it before. The bell chimed, admitting 2 men in expensive suits. The first was broad-shouldered with alert posture, but the second man made Isabella's breath catch. Tall black hair slicked back, dark green eyes that swept the cafe like a predator noting exits. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow. When his gaze landed on her, she felt pinned in place. Lorenzo Salvatore didn't know why Marco had insisted they stop at this cafe. They had more important matters: the Rossetti family encroaching on territory, shipments to coordinate. But Marco had been persistent about checking a situation in the neighborhood. "Buongiorno," Marco said to Sofia. "2 espressos, please." Isabella prepared the coffees with trembling hands, feeling the dark-haired man's eyes on her. As she carried the cups to their table, she found herself humming unconsciously. A melody from her dreams, rising from her throat like it belonged there. She set the cups down and looked up to find the dark-haired man staring at her with absolute shock, his face drained of color. "Where did you hear that?" His voice came out harsh, sharp as a blade. Isabella stepped back instinctively. What? "That melody? The one you were just humming. Where did you hear it?" Lorenzo demanded, half rising from his seat. Marco put a warning hand on his arm, but he shook it off. "I don't know. It's just been in my head lately." "Why? Who taught it to you?" Lorenzo pressed, standing fully. "Tell me who taught you that song." "Nobody taught me. I don't even know where it came from. It's been in my dreams." Lorenzo stared at her, his mind refusing to accept what his instincts screamed. She couldn't know that song. It was impossible. That melody had been Giuliana's, his dead wife's composition for their first anniversary. A song never written down, never recorded, never shared. A song that died with her 3 years ago on a rain-slicked road. "What's your name?" he asked, voice quieter but intense. "Isabella. Isabella Costa." "How long have you been in Florence?" 8 months. "I came from Brazil to study music." Lorenzo studied her face, searching for deception. But all he saw was genuine confusion and growing fear. She looked nothing like Giuliana. His wife had been blonde and blue-eyed. This woman was all warm brown tones and Brazilian beauty, yet she hummed his dead wife's secret melody perfectly. "Boss," Marco said quietly, "we should go." Lorenzo pulled out his wallet, dropped a €50 note on the table. His eyes never left Isabella's face. "I'll be back." It sounded like both promise and threat. After they left, Isabella stood frozen. Sofia was beside her instantly. "Are you all right, Cara? Who were those men?" "I don't know." But that was a lie. On some deep cellular level, she felt like she knew him, like she'd known him forever. That night in her tiny apartment, Isabella couldn't sleep. She sat by her window with her guitar, letting her fingers find the melody. It flowed naturally, like breathing, even though she'd never learned it. As she played, fragments of memory flickered through her mind. Not her memories, someone else's. A grand piano in a frescoed room, strong hands covering smaller ones on the keys. A deep, warm voice. "Again, amore mio, play it again." She set down the guitar with shaking hands. This was insane. But when she looked at her notebook, she found she'd written out the entire melody in perfect musical notation. something she'd never learned to do. 8 kilometers away in the hills of Fiesole, Lorenzo stood in his music room, staring at the grand piano that hadn't been played since Giuliana's death. Marco found him there. She hummed Giuliana's song, Lorenzo said, voice raw. Note for note, Marco. Perfect. How is that possible? I don't know, boss. What if she's come back? The words barely whispered. What if the old stories are true, and she found her way back to me? Marco's heart ached for his friend. Boss, she's a Brazilian waitress. She doesn't look anything like Giuliana. Nobody knows that song, Lorenzo's voice cracked. We never shared it. So tell me, Marco, how does a woman from Brazil end up humming it in a cafe? The next afternoon, as Isabella walked home, she felt eyes on her. Marco stood across the street, not hiding. Her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize but somehow knew. Isabella. Lorenzo's voice. Why are you having me followed? For your protection. From people who might want to know why you're suddenly important to me. Can we meet? There are things I need to discuss with you. I don't want to meet with you. You're already involved. The moment you hummed that melody, you became involved. I'm trying to understand why, and I think you deserve to understand too. Against every instinct, Isabella agreed. Where? Piazzale Michelangelo, tomorrow at sunset. It's public, safe, just a conversation. She found him at the famous viewpoint the next evening, the city spread below like a Renaissance painting. He stood at the stone balustrade, profile sharp against golden light. Thank you for coming, Lorenzo said without turning. I wasn't sure you would. I need answers as much as you do. He turned to face her. 3 years ago, my wife died. Her name was Giuliana. She was a pianist, a composer. She was everything. The melody she composed for me, for our first anniversary. She called it Ritorno, return, because she said no matter where life took us, we would always return to each other. His voice was steady, but an ocean of pain lay beneath. She never shared it with anyone, never wrote it down. It was ours. Secret. Sacred. But I hummed it, Isabella whispered. And you have no history of learning it. No teacher who knew it. No connection to me or my family. Lorenzo moved closer. You think I'm crazy? That I believe you're her, reborn or reincarnated? Are you? I don't know what I think. But when I heard you humming that song, I felt something I haven't felt since she died. Hope. His hand came up, gently touching her cheek. And I need to understand why. Tears burned Isabella's eyes. I've been having dreams, memories that aren't mine. I know things I shouldn't know. I wrote out your wife's composition in my sleep, even though I can't write music. And sometimes when I look in the mirror, I feel like I'm in the wrong body. Lorenzo's breath caught. His thumb brushed away a tear. What do you see in these dreams? Your villa, the music room with the piano, frescoes of gods and angels, a bedroom with white curtains, and you. I see you, but younger, happy. Tell me something only Giuliana would know. Isabella closed her eyes, letting memories surface. There's an olive tree in the garden. Ancient. Giuliana sat under it when she needed to think. She carved something into the trunk on your wedding day. 2 sets of initials inside a heart. Lorenzo's hand trembled. LS and GF. Lorenzo Salvatore and Giuliana Ferretti. She was so happy that day she could barely breathe. She wore her grandmother's earrings, and you forgot your vows and had to improvise. You said she was your ritorno, your return. The home you'd been searching for all your life. Lorenzo's composure cracked. His forehead dropped to rest against hers. How can you know that? I don't know, but I do. I know how you take your espresso, 3 sugars. I know you have a scar on your left shoulder from a knife fight when you were 19. I know you're afraid of thunderstorms because your brother died in one when you were 7. They stood in the golden sunset, the city below them, 2 people caught in an impossible situation. Lorenzo pulled back to look into her eyes. I don't know if you're her or if you somehow received her memories, but I know you matter. And in my world, Things that matter need protection. I don't want protection. I want to understand what's happening to me. Then let me help you understand. Come to the villa. See if anything triggers more memories. Maybe together we can figure this out. Okay, she whispered. But I want someone to know where I am. And I want your promise that you'll let me leave if I want to. You have my word. The drive to Villa Salvatore wound through Fiesoli's hills as twilight painted the landscape purple and gold. When they arrived, Isabella stepped out and stared. It was exactly as she'd seen it in dreams. It's real, she whispered. Inside, her feet carried her without hesitation. Upstairs, turning left, then right. Third door on the right, the music room. She pushed open the door. The grand piano, frescoed ceilings of Apollo and the Muses, and on the wall, a portrait of a blonde, blue-eyed woman smiling with gentle joy. Juliana. Isabella's knees went weak. Lorenzo steadied her, his hand on her elbow. She moved to the piano, sat on the bench. Her hands hovered over the keys, trembling. She'd never played piano before. But her hands knew what to do. The first notes rang pure and clear. Ritorno poured from her fingers with the confidence of years of training she didn't have. Her hands danced across the keys without a single mistake. Lorenzo stood frozen, hand pressed to his mouth, eyes wet. This was impossible. But the music was real. Every note exactly as Juliana had played it. When the final chord faded, Isabella's hands fell to her lap. She was shaking, sobbing. Lorenzo dropped to his knees beside the bench, taking her hands. "It's you," he said, voice breaking. "You came back. I don't know who I am anymore. I'm Isabella. I've lived in Brazil my whole life. But I'm also her. I remember dying. I remember the crash, thinking I wasn't ready to leave you." Lorenzo pulled her into his arms, and she collapsed against him. For 3 years he'd been empty. And now the universe had given back something he'd lost. "I'm sorry," he said, pulling back. "This isn't fair to you. Nothing about this is fair, but it's real. I can't ignore it and go back to serving coffee." Marco appeared in the doorway. "Boss, we have a situation. The Rossetti family hit one of our shipments. 3 men dead. And boss, they know about her. They're saying you've gone soft, chasing ghosts." The moment shattered. Lorenzo's face hardened. "They're using me as bait," Isabella said steadily. "They're not wrong," Lorenzo admitted. "I need to handle this. Marco will take you home." "No. If I leave, I'll be alone and vulnerable. Your enemies already know about me." "She's right, boss," Marco said. Lorenzo nodded. "You stay here. Guards on the villa. No one gets in or out without my approval." After Lorenzo left to handle the Rossetti situation, Isabella explored the villa, tracing Juliana's memories through the halls. That night, the dreams returned clearer than ever. She saw Lorenzo and Juliana's wedding, their first year of marriage, full of joy. Juliana composing Ritorno with tears of happiness. But then, darker memories. Arguments between Lorenzo and other men. Someone pushing Lorenzo to expand into territories he refused. Drug trafficking, human smuggling. And there was a face. A man in his 50s with silver hair and cold eyes. Someone Juliana didn't trust. "Uncle Alessandro," Juliana's voice echoed. "Lorenzo, I don't like how he looks at things. At me, like he's calculating value." Then the dream jumped to the day of the crash. Juliana driving through hills, thinking about Lorenzo's birthday surprise. Then the car behind her, coming too fast. The deliberate impact. The sickening moment of knowing she would die. And the face in the rearview mirror. Alessandro. Isabella woke, gasping. She grabbed her phone, calling Lorenzo despite the 3 a.m. hour. "Isabella? What's wrong?" "Alessandro." The name came out harsh. "Lorenzo, it was Alessandro. He killed her." Silence. Then, in a voice colder than winter, "Tell me everything." She recounted the dream, the memories, the arguments about expansion, Juliana's unease. the crash itself, Alessandro's face in the mirror. Are you certain? Lorenzo's voice was deadly calm. Because if you're right, I'm going to kill him. And I need to know I'm killing the right man. I'm certain. These aren't just dreams. They're Juliana's memories. She saw him. She knew, right at the end. The expansion. 3 years ago, I voted no on moving into new territories. Alessandro stood to make millions if that deal went through. He killed her to hurt me, to make me weak. Lorenzo, be careful. If he suspects, he won't. I'm very good at hiding what I'm thinking. But Isabella, don't tell Marco about Alessandro. Not yet. I need to move carefully. I understand. Promise me you'll be careful. I will. Try to sleep. I'll be home before sunrise. Dawn was breaking when Lorenzo returned. Isabella met him in the entrance hall. His suit was rumpled, there was blood on his cuff, and his eyes held the weariness of necessary but ugly things. Is it done? She asked. The Rossetti family won't be a problem anymore. He shrugged off his jacket. And I've invited Alessandro to dinner tomorrow night. He thinks I want to discuss strategy. He has no idea he's walking into his own execution. Lorenzo crossed to her, taking her face in his hands. I don't know if you're Juliana Reborn or Isabella who received her memories, but I know you matter. Not because of who you might have been, but because of who you are. And I will protect you. I'm afraid of losing myself in these memories, of disappearing into Juliana and forgetting I was ever Isabella. Then I'll remind you. I'll remind you that you're from Brazil, that you love music, that you came here chasing a dream. Because I lost Juliana once. I won't make the same mistake by trying to turn you into her. It was the promise she needed. She wrapped her arms around him, and he relaxed into the embrace. The next evening, Isabella was sequestered in the guest room with strict instructions not to come out. At 8 o'clock, she heard Alessandro arrive. Voices downstairs, faint but distinguishable. Lorenzo's welcoming tones, then Alessandro's smooth voice. Then Lorenzo's voice rose, cold as Arctic ice. How long did you think you could hide it? 3 years you've stood beside me, helped me grieve, all while knowing you murdered her. Alessandro's voice turned defensive. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult my intelligence. I have a witness. Someone who saw you that night. Someone who saw your face right before she died. That's impossible. There were no survivors. Maybe souls remember. Maybe they come back to set things right. Silence. Then Alessandro's nervous laugh. You've gone insane. You killed her to weaken me, to push your agenda. How much did they pay you, Alessandro? You can't prove any of this. I don't need a court. I'm judge, jury, and executioner in my world. You taught me that. Chaos. Furniture overturning. A grunt of pain. Something breaking. Despite Lorenzo's instructions, Isabella ran down the stairs. In the study, Lorenzo had Alessandro pinned against the wall, hand around his throat. Alessandro's face was red, eyes bulging. Marco stood in the doorway, weapon drawn, watching. Lorenzo! Isabella's voice cut through the violence. Don't! Lorenzo's head whipped around, eyes wild. I told you to stay upstairs. I know, but if you kill him like this, you'll regret it. Juliana wouldn't want this. She wouldn't want you to destroy yourself for revenge. He murdered her. Yes, he does deserve to die. But not like this. Not in rage. You're better than that. Juliana knew you were better than that. Let him go and do this the right way. Your way, calculated, controlled. For a long moment, Lorenzo didn't move. Then slowly, he released Alessandro's throat. The older man collapsed, gasping. Marco, Lorenzo said, voice rough. Take him to the warehouse. I'll deal with him tomorrow when I can think clearly. As Marco dragged Alessandro out, the old man's eyes found Isabella. You, he breathed. You really are her. Love is more powerful than death, Alessandro. You should have remembered that. After they left, Lorenzo stood with his back to her, hands braced on his desk, head bowed. Isabella approached, her hand finding his back. You did the right thing. I wanted to kill him. His voice was raw. For 3 years I've been empty, and he was the reason. But if you'd killed him in that moment, you would have given him power over you. This way, you stay in control. Lorenzo turned, tears tracking down his face. He looked suddenly vulnerable, human. How did you know what to say? Because Juliana knew you. She knew that beneath everything, there's a man who values honor and control. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, body shaking. I don't want to lose you again. Whether you're her or you or both, I can't lose you again. You won't lose me. I'm here. I'm real. I'm not going anywhere. They stood like that for a long time. Two people finding comfort in impossible circumstances. The next morning, at 10 o'clock, Marco brought Alessandro to the villa. The older man looked haggard, his expensive suit wrinkled, silver hair disheveled. Lorenzo met them in the music room. A deliberate choice, where Juliana had spent so many happy hours. Alessandro looked at the piano with what might have been regret. I loved her too, Alessandro said quietly. Juliana, she was like a daughter to me. I don't have to believe anything you say, Lorenzo replied coldly. You murdered her. It was never supposed to happen that way. The plan was just to scare her. But the driver I hired was too aggressive. The crash was worse than intended. Alessandro's voice cracked. I never meant for her to die. But she did die. And you let me grieve, stood by my side, all while knowing you were responsible. Lorenzo's control was impressive. You're a traitor, Alessandro. I know what I am. I've known it for 3 years. So if you've brought me here to kill me, do it. I deserve it. I'm going to give you a choice. First option, exile. You leave Italy today. You go to whatever country will have you, and you never come back. You give up your name, your money, your connections. You become nobody. If I ever hear you've tried to return, I will hunt you down, and your death will not be quick. Alessandro swallowed. And the second option? Death. Here now, quick and painless. Marco will handle it. You'll be buried in an unmarked grave, and within a generation, no one will remember your name. The room fell silent except for Alessandro's labored breathing. Why give me a choice at all? Lorenzo glanced at Isabella. Because someone I care about reminded me that vengeance and justice aren't the same thing. Vengeance would be killing you slowly. Justice is giving you the same choice you gave Juliana. Die or run. Alessandro looked at Isabella. You stopped him from killing me last night. Why? Because I remember what you were before you became a traitor. I remember Uncle Alessandro who brought birthday presents, who taught Lorenzo how to lead. I remember the man you were, and I thought maybe he deserved a chance at redemption. Alessandro's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. I know it changes nothing. But I am so sorry. Your apology is worthless, Lorenzo said flatly. Choose, death or exile. 60 seconds. Alessandro looked around the music room one last time. At the piano, at Juliana's portrait, at the windows overlooking the valley. Exile, he finally said. I choose exile. Lorenzo nodded. Marco will drive you to the airport. 1 suitcase, 500 euros. That's more than you deserve. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank her. Lorenzo gestured to Isabella. She's the reason you're still breathing. Marco took Alessandro's arm, leading him out. At the threshold, Alessandro looked back. For what it's worth, I did love her. And I love you too, nephew. That was always real. Then you should have chosen better, Lorenzo said. Because love without loyalty is just another word for betrayal. After they left, the music room fell silent. Isabella moved to Lorenzo, wrapping her arms around him from behind. He shuddered, the control cracking slightly. His hands covered hers, holding them against his chest. Is it wrong that I feel relieved? He asked quietly. I thought confronting him would bring closure. but I just feel empty. Justice doesn't always feel satisfying. Sometimes it just feels necessary. Eventually, Lorenzo turned in her arms, looking down at her. I need to ask you something. Do you want to stay here? In Florence? In this villa? In this life? Or do you want to go back to being just Isabella Costa? Isabella thought about her tiny apartment, the simple life she'd been building. But when she tried to imagine walking away from Lorenzo, she couldn't. I don't think I can be just Isabella anymore. But I don't want to be just Juliana either. I want to be something new. Someone who carries both lives and builds something beautiful from the pieces. And do you want to build that with me? His voice was barely a whisper. Yes. But Lorenzo, I'm not Juliana. I won't be her. I'll make my own choices. I'll challenge you. I'll be difficult and complicated. I know. And I don't want you to be her. I want you to be you. Then yes, I want to stay. I want to figure out who I am with you beside me. Lorenzo kissed her, and it was a promise. A commitment. When they pulled apart, she saw tears in his eyes. But for the first time, they looked like tears of joy. Over the following weeks, Isabella settled into villa life. She kept in touch with Sophia, who was surprisingly understanding. Florence is a city of miracles and mysteries, Sophia said. And you, Cara, are both. Isabella spent her days in the music room, playing Juliana's piano but composing her own pieces, blending classical techniques with Brazilian rhythms. The memories of Juliana's life began to integrate rather than intrude. Some days she felt more like Juliana, other days more like Isabella, and gradually she accepted that she was genuinely both and genuinely neither. Lorenzo kept his promise to help her maintain her identity. He encouraged her Portuguese, her Brazilian cooking, her stories about Mogi das Cruzes. Slowly, they built something new together. Marco remained suspicious at first, but gradually softened. The turning point came when he found Isabella in the music room one evening, staring at the piano. She used to play for me sometimes, Marco said. Juliana. When Lorenzo was away and she was lonely, she was kind to me when she didn't have to be. She thought of you as family, Isabella said. She used to say you were the brother Lorenzo never had. I failed her. I should have protected her better. It wasn't your fault. But you can protect me now. Marco looked at her, really looked at her. You're not her, you're different. But you're good for him. Lorenzo smiles again. He plans for the future. He extended his hand. I'm going to trust you. Isabella shook his hand, feeling like she'd passed a crucial test. 2 months after Alessandro's exile, on a December evening when Florence was dressed in Christmas lights, Lorenzo took Isabella back to Piazzale Michelangelo. I brought you here because this is where everything changed, Lorenzo said, holding her hands. This is where I first believed I'd been given a second chance. I've been thinking about what you said, about creating new memories, and I realized I don't want to keep living in the past. I want a future with you. From his pocket, Lorenzo pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, white gold with small sapphires set in a pattern like musical notes. The notes are from Ritorno, Juliana's composition, but the ring itself is new, something that belongs to our story. Lorenzo knelt on one knee, tourists stopping to watch, the city spread out below. Isabella Costa, I'm not asking you to be my wife reborn. I'm asking you to be my future. Will you marry me? Yes, Isabella said through tears. Yes, yes, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Then he was standing, pulling her into his arms, kissing her while people applauded and the sun set over Florence. As they stood there, Isabella felt Juliana's presence like a gentle whisper. Not intrusive, just a soft acknowledgement of approval. The woman she had been was finally at peace, her promise kept, her journey complete. Now it was time to let Isabella live fully. Thank you, Isabella whispered. For what? Lorenzo asked. For believing in impossible things, for seeing me as both who I was and who I am, for loving me enough to let me figure out which is which. That's the easiest thing I've ever done, Lorenzo said, and kissed her again. They were married 3 months later in the villa garden, beneath the ancient olive tree with its carved promise of eternal love. Sophia stood as maid of honor, crying happy tears. Marco was Lorenzo's best man. His suspicion transformed into genuine affection. The ceremony was small, intimate. But Isabella felt another presence there too. Juliana, watching with joy as the man she'd loved found happiness again. As Lorenzo slipped a wedding band onto Isabella's finger, she felt complete. She was Isabella Costa from Brazil. She was Juliana Ferretti reborn. She was both and neither, and something entirely new. A woman who'd traveled across death itself to keep a promise, and a woman brave enough to build a future from fragments of the past. When they were pronounced married, Lorenzo kissed her with passion and tenderness. The small gathering cheered, and Isabella laughed through tears, her heart full. That night, after guests had left, they stood in the music room. Isabella sat at the piano and began to play. Not ritorno, but something new. A composition she'd been working on called Começar de Novo, Begin Again. It blended Juliana's classical style with Isabella's Brazilian influences. Lorenzo stood behind her, hands on her shoulders, listening. When the final notes faded, he leaned down and whispered, "Play it again, amore mio. Play our song." So she did. And as her fingers danced across the keys, as Lorenzo warmed her back, as the villa settled around them with centuries of history, Isabella finally understood the truth. Love doesn't end when life does. It transforms, evolves, finds new ways to express itself. Juliana's love had been powerful enough to break through death, to plant itself in a new soul, to bring two people together across impossible odds. But it was Isabella's courage that allowed that love to take root and grow into something new. They were partners now, building a life that honored the past while embracing the future. Isabella continued her music, eventually performing small concerts in Florence under her own name. Lorenzo slowly legitimized his business operations, moving away from darker ventures. Marco became not just Lorenzo's right hand, but Isabella's protector and friend. Sophia visited often, and Alessandro never returned to Italy, living out his exile as a broken man. 5 years after their wedding, Isabella stood in the music room holding a small bundle wrapped in blue blankets. Lorenzo beside her, both gazing down at their son with wonder. "What should we name him?" Lorenzo asked softly. "Matteo," Isabella said. "It means gift of God. Because that's what he is, what all of this is. A gift we never expected, but will treasure forever." Lorenzo kissed her temple, eyes wet. "Matteo Salvatore, it's perfect." As if in agreement, the baby made a small sound, his tiny hand wrapping around his father's finger. Isabella felt the last remnants of Juliana's presence fade away completely. Not gone, not forgotten, but integrated so thoroughly that there was no longer any distinction. She was simply Isabella now, a woman who'd lived 2 lives and emerged stronger. The October light filtered through the windows, painting everything gold. Outside, the cypress trees swayed, and the ancient olive tree stood sentinel, its carved promise enduring. Florence stretched below, eternal and beautiful. "Play something for him," Lorenzo suggested. Isabella settled at the piano bench, adjusting Matteo in her arms, and let her fingers find the keys. She played a lullaby, one her mother had sung in Brazil, one Juliana's mother had sung in Siena. She played the blending of 2 cultures, 2 lives, 2 souls. And as she played, as Lorenzo stood beside her with his hand on her shoulder, as their son listened with ancient newborn wisdom, Isabella finally understood the full truth of her impossible journey. She hadn't come to Florence to study music or serve coffee. She'd come because destiny called her, because a love strong enough to transcend death had pulled her across an ocean. She'd come because some promises are too powerful to be broken by mortality. She'd come home, to a home she'd never known but had always been waiting for, to a love that found her across lifetimes, to a future built on an impossible past. The music filled the villa, spilling through open windows to drift across Tuscan hills. And if anyone listened carefully, they might have heard three melodies woven together: Juliana's classical precision, Isabella's Brazilian warmth, and something new: the song of a family born from love, loss, and the impossible magic of second chances. As the final notes faded into golden afternoon, Lorenzo leaned down and whispered, "Welcome home, amore mio. Welcome home." And Isabella, holding their son, surrounded by love and music and the promise of all their tomorrows, whispered back, "I'm already here. I've always been here. I'll always be here." Because some loves are written in the stars. Some souls recognize each other across impossible distances. And some melodies, once learned, can never truly be forgotten. They simply wait, patient and eternal, for the right moment to be played again. Years would pass. Matteo would grow up running through the villa gardens, his laughter echoing off ancient stone. He would learn piano from his mother, his small fingers eventually mastering the same keys that once held secrets. And sometimes, when Isabella played ritorno for him, she would tell him the story of two souls who loved each other so much that not even death could keep them apart. Lorenzo would continue transforming his empire, washing blood from his family's legacy, and building something cleaner, something his son could inherit without shame. The scars of his past would never fully heal, but Isabella's presence, her light, her music, her unwavering belief in his capacity for goodness, would guide him toward redemption. And Isabella herself would become exactly who she was meant to be. Not Juliana, not just the girl from Mogi das Cruzes, but a synthesis of both, stronger for having lived twice and loved deeply enough to transcend the boundaries between life and death. The melody that brought them together would echo through generations, a secret song passed down through the Salvatore family, a reminder that love is the most powerful force in the universe, capable of crossing oceans, bridging lifetimes, and turning impossibilities into the most beautiful realities. 7 years after Matteo's birth, on a cold January morning, Isabella woke to find Lorenzo already dressed, staring out the bedroom window at the frost-covered gardens. Something was wrong. She could feel the tension radiating from him like heat from a fire. "What happened?" she asked, sitting up. Lorenzo turned, and she saw fear in his eyes. Real fear, something she'd rarely witnessed. "Roberto Rossetti is out of prison. Early release for good behavior." His jaw clenched. "And Marco just received intelligence that he's been asking questions. About you, about Matteo, about how a dead woman's melody ended up in a Brazilian waitress." Isabella's blood ran cold. "He knows about the memories. He knows something isn't right. And Roberto is smarter than his father was, more dangerous. He's been consolidating power while he was inside, making alliances." Lorenzo moved to sit beside her on the bed, taking her hands. "He lost everything when I destroyed his family's operations 7 years ago. His father died in prison. His brother scattered, and he blames me for all of it. What does he want? Revenge. But not the quick kind. He wants to take everything from me the way I took everything from him." Lorenzo's grip tightened on her hands. "Isabella, I need you to take Matteo and go somewhere safe. Just for a few weeks while I handle this." "No." The word came out firm, stronger than she felt. "I'm not running. We're not running. This is our home, Lorenzo, and I won't let some criminal drive us out of it. This isn't about pride. It's not about pride. It's about standing our ground. You said yourself that showing weakness invites attack." Isabella stood, wrapping a robe around herself. "Besides, running won't help. If Roberto wants to find us, he will. At least here we have security, we have Marco, we have people we trust." Lorenzo studied her face, seeing the determination there. This was Isabella's strength showing through, the courage that had brought her across an ocean, that had allowed her to accept impossible truths, that had stopped him from killing Alessandro in rage. But underneath, he could also see Giuliana's strategic mind working, calculating risks and probabilities. "Then we need to be smart about this," Lorenzo said finally. "Matteo doesn't leave the villa grounds without armed escort. You stay close to home. And I'm going to need to send a message to Roberto, make it clear that threatening my family is a line he doesn't want to cross." Over the next few days, the villa became a fortress. Additional guards were posted, security systems upgraded. Marco moved into one of the guest rooms, coordinating protection details with military precision. And Isabella found herself looking over her shoulder, seeing threats in every shadow. Matteo sensed the change in atmosphere. At 7 years old, he was bright and perceptive, with his mother's musical talent and his father's sharp intelligence. One evening, he found Isabella in the music room, staring at the piano but not playing. "Mama, why are there so many new guards?" he asked, climbing onto the bench beside her. Isabella wrapped an arm around him, breathing in the scent of his shampoo and little boy sweat. How could she explain this world to him? The violence, the danger, the price of loving a man like Lorenzo. "Sometimes, Tesoro, there are people who want to hurt the ones we love. Your papa is very good at protecting us, but he needs help from the guards to make sure we're safe." "Like knights protecting a castle?" "Exactly like that." She kissed the top of his head, grateful for childhood innocence that could transform danger into adventure. "Will you play for me?" Matteo asked. "The return song? Nonna Giuliana's song?" Isabella's breath caught. Matteo had started calling the woman in the portrait Nonna Giuliana on his own, somehow understanding that she was part of their family even though she'd died before he was born. She'd told him stories about Giuliana, about the love that had transcended death, making it into a fairy tale he could understand. Of course. Isabella positioned her hands on the keys and began to play Ritorno. The melody flowed from her fingers, and Matteo leaned against her side, humming along. He'd heard it so many times he knew every note. She didn't notice Lorenzo standing in the doorway until the song ended. When she looked up, she saw him watching them with an expression of such profound love and fear that it made her chest ache. This was what Roberto Rossetti wanted to destroy. This moment, this peace, this family. That night, after Matteo was in bed, Lorenzo called Isabella to his study. Marco was there too, along with 2 other men she recognized as high-ranking members of the organization. On the desk was a photograph that made her stomach turn. It was Matteo, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. He was in the villa garden, playing with a ball, completely unaware he was being watched. Someone had gotten close enough to photograph their son. When? Isabella's voice was steady despite the fear coursing through her. "This afternoon, during his supervised playtime. Our perimeter was breached for approximately 4 minutes before the intruder was detected and fled." Marco's face was grim. "We found the camera equipment hidden in the cypress grove. Professional setup, expensive gear." "Roberto is sending a message," Lorenzo said, his voice dangerously quiet. "He's saying he can reach us whenever he wants, that our security means nothing." "Then what do we do?" Isabella asked. The men exchanged glances, and she realized they'd already been discussing options. "We could move you and Matteo to the safe house in Switzerland," one of the men suggested. "It's more isolated, easier to defend." "Or we could go on the offensive," Marco said. "Find Roberto and end this before it escalates." "He's expecting that," Lorenzo replied. "He wants me to come after him, wants to draw me into a trap. Every move has been calculated to provoke a reaction." Isabella looked at the photograph of her son, so innocent and unaware. An idea began forming, dangerous and audacious, but possibly the only way to end this without endless bloodshed. "What if I meet with him?" she said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at her. Lorenzo looked like she'd suggested jumping off a cliff. "Absolutely not," he said firmly. "Listen to me. Roberto is obsessed with understanding what I am, how I know things I shouldn't. He's more curious than you're giving him credit for. What if I use that curiosity? What if I offer to meet with him, to explain everything in exchange for leaving our family alone? It's too dangerous, Marco protested. He could kill you, use you as leverage. He could, Isabella agreed. But I don't think he will. Not until he understands. And maybe, just maybe, if he understands that what happened to me is real, that love really can transcend death, he'll realize that some things are bigger than revenge. Lorenzo stood, pacing to the window. You're asking me to let you walk into the lion's den. I'm asking you to trust me. Trust that Juliana's memories have taught me how to read dangerous men. Trust that I know what I'm doing. And if you're wrong? Lorenzo's voice cracked. I can't lose you again, Isabella. I won't survive it a second time. She moved to him, placing her hand on his chest over his heart. You won't lose me. But Lorenzo, if we don't try something different, this will never end. Roberto will keep pushing, keep threatening until one of you is dead. And I refuse to let Matteo grow up in that shadow. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the antique clock. Finally, Lorenzo looked at Marco. What do you think? Marco studied Isabella with the calculating gaze of a man who'd spent his life assessing risks. I think she's braver than any of us. And I think she might be right that Roberto's curiosity could be used against him. But if we do this, we do it on our terms. Our location, our security, our control. Lorenzo turned back to Isabella. If I agree to this, and I'm not saying I am, you go in wired. Marco and I will be close by, armed and ready. At the first sign of trouble, we extract you. Agreed. And you let me set the meeting terms. Everything happens exactly as I plan it. Okay. Lorenzo pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Against her hair, he whispered, You're either the bravest woman I've ever known or the most reckless. Can I be both? She asked, and despite the tension, he laughed. The meeting was arranged through intermediaries. Roberto agreed to meet at a neutral location, an abandoned church on the outskirts of Florence, one that had been deconsecrated decades ago and now stood empty. Lorenzo's team swept it for weapons and explosives, placed hidden security, and positioned snipers in the surrounding buildings. The day of the meeting, Isabella dressed carefully. Not in expensive clothes that would intimidate, but in simple jeans and a sweater. She wanted to look like what she was, a mother, a wife, a woman trying to protect her family. Marco fitted her with a wire so small it was virtually invisible, and Lorenzo checked it 3 times. Remember, Lorenzo said, holding her face in his hands, you give the signal, and we come in. No heroics, no risks. No heroics, Isabella promised. She kissed him, long and deep, then pulled away before she could lose her nerve. The drive to the church was silent. Marco drove, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. When they arrived, Isabella saw Roberto Rossetti standing by the altar, alone as agreed. He was in his late 30s, handsome in a cruel way, with dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. I'll be right here, Marco said as Isabella stepped out of the car. 5 minutes. That's all I'm giving him. Isabella walked into the church, her footsteps echoing on the stone floor. Roberto watched her approach, his expression unreadable. Isabella Salvatore, he said, his voice smooth. Or should I say, Juliana Ferretti? I'm still trying to figure out which one you really are. Both, Isabella said simply, and neither. That's not possible. Neither is a Brazilian waitress knowing a song that only 2 people in the world ever knew. Yet here we are. Isabella stopped a few feet away from him, maintaining distance but not showing fear. What do you want, Roberto? I want to understand. I've spent 7 years in prison thinking about how Lorenzo destroyed my family. And when I get out, I hear rumors about his wife. This miraculous woman who appeared out of nowhere, who somehow knows things she shouldn't, who he protects like she's made of glass. Roberto circled her slowly. Some people say you're a con artist. Others say you're genuinely disturbed, that you believe you're someone else. But I've been watching you, and you're neither of those things, are you? No. So tell me, how does a woman from Brazil end up with a dead woman's memories? Isabella took a deep breath. Because love doesn't end with death. Because Giuliana Ferretti loved Lorenzo Salvatore so completely that when she died, she couldn't let go. She made a wish, a prayer, a deal with whatever forces govern the universe. And somehow, impossibly, those memories, that love, found their way into me. Roberto laughed, but it sounded hollow. You expect me to believe in reincarnation? I don't expect you to believe anything, but I can prove it. Isabella moved to an old piano against the wall, covered in dust. She sat on the bench and began to play. Not Ritorno, but another piece. One of Giuliana's own compositions that had never been written down, never shared. A melody she'd only played once for Lorenzo in the privacy of their bedroom. As the music filled the church, Isabella watched Roberto's face change. Skepticism gave way to confusion, then to something like awe. How do you know that? Roberto whispered when she finished. My sister Lucia was outside their bedroom window that night. She told me about that song before she died. She said it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever heard, but she never learned how it went. No one did. Giuliana played it, Isabella said quietly. One time on the night of their second anniversary. It was a gift, something private, something Lorenzo never spoke about to anyone. But I remember the feeling of those keys under my fingers, the way Lorenzo cried when he heard it, the way we made love afterward with that melody still hanging in the air. Roberto staggered back, sitting heavily in a pew. Mio Dio, it's real. You're really her. I'm really me, Isabella corrected. I'm Isabella Costa, who grew up in Brazil and came to Italy to chase a dream. But I'm also carrying Giuliana Ferretti's memories, her love, her music. I'm both women, and I'm neither. I'm something that shouldn't exist but does. Why are you telling me this? Roberto's voice was rough with emotion. Because I want you to understand that what Lorenzo has built with me isn't weakness. It's the opposite. It's proof that some things, love, family, loyalty, are powerful enough to transcend death itself. And if you destroy that, if you hurt him or me or our son, you're not just committing murder. You're destroying something sacred, something that the universe itself conspired to create. Roberto was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, younger, less hardened. My father used to say that Lorenzo Salvatore was the most dangerous man in Florence because he had something to lose. He said men with nothing to lose are reckless, but men fighting to protect what they love are unstoppable. Your father was right. He was also a bastard who got what he deserved, Roberto said bitterly. He taught me to see the world as a zero-sum game. Someone wins, someone loses. Take before you're taken from. But you, he looked at her with something like wonder. You're telling me there's more to it than that. I'm telling you that revenge is a poison that destroys the person carrying it more than anyone else. I'm telling you that 7 years in prison should have taught you that the old ways, the violent ways, only lead to more pain. Isabella moved closer to him, her voice gentle but firm. Roberto, you have a choice. You can keep pursuing revenge against Lorenzo, and eventually one of you will kill the other. Or you can walk away, start fresh. Build something new instead of destroying what others have built. He destroyed everything I had. No. Your father's choices destroyed everything. Lorenzo just defended what was his. And if you're honest with yourself, you know that. Isabella paused. You're young enough to start over. Smart enough to build a legitimate business. Strong enough to break the cycle. The question is, are you brave enough? Roberto's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to be anything other than what I am. Yes, you do. Everyone does. It just takes courage to change. Isabella extended her hand. Make peace with Lorenzo. Walk away from this life. And maybe someday, you'll find your own impossible love story. Roberto stared at her hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and shook it. I'll think about what you've said. That's all I'm asking. As Isabella walked back to the car where Marco waited, she felt lighter than she had in days. She didn't know if Roberto would truly walk away, but she'd planted a seed. Sometimes that was enough. Lorenzo was waiting at the villa when they returned, pacing the entrance hall like a caged animal. He pulled Isabella into his arms the moment she walked through the door. "Never again," he muttered into her hair. "Never again do I let you do something that dangerous." "It worked," Isabella said. "I think he'll leave us alone. And if he doesn't, then we deal with it. Together. Like we always do." That night, Isabella checked on Matteo before bed. He was asleep, sprawled across his mattress with his stuffed lion clutched in one hand. She brushed hair off his forehead, marveling at how something so perfect could exist in a world so complicated. "He'll be safe," Lorenzo said from the doorway. "Whatever it takes, I'll make sure he's safe." "I know." Isabella joined him, and they stood together in the doorway, watching their son sleep. "Do you ever wonder if we did the right thing? Bringing a child into this world, with all its danger and uncertainty?" "Every day," Lorenzo admitted. "But then I look at him, and I know that he's the best thing we've ever done. He's proof that love wins, that something beautiful can grow even in the darkest soil." 2 weeks later, word came through Marco's network. Roberto Rossetti had left Italy. He'd sold his interests, paid his debts, and boarded a plane to Argentina. No threats, no declarations, just a quiet exit. With his departure, a weight lifted from the villa. Life slowly returned to normal, or whatever passed for normal in the Salvatore household. Isabella resumed her small concerts, playing for intimate audiences in Florence's hidden venues. Lorenzo continued his work, though he spent more evenings at home now, more time with Matteo, more time being a father instead of just a protector. One evening, Isabella found an envelope on the piano. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a brief note in Italian. "You were right. There's more to life than revenge. Thank you for showing me that. May your family have all the peace I never knew. R." Isabella showed it to Lorenzo, and she saw his shoulders relax in a way they hadn't since Roberto's release. "It's over," he said, almost disbelieving. "For now," Isabella agreed. "There will always be new threats, new challenges. That's the world we live in. But we'll face them together. Always together." As autumn returned to Florence, bringing with it the golden light and falling leaves that Isabella had first experienced 7 years ago, she found herself reflecting on the impossible journey that had brought her here. From a café in Santo Spirito to a villa in the hills. From a simple waitress to the wife of one of Florence's most powerful men. From Isabella Costa to something more complex, more layered, more real. One afternoon, she sat with Sofia at a cafe near the Duomo. Her old friend and employer had aged gracefully, her hair now completely white, but her eyes still sharp and knowing. "You look happy, Cara," Sofia observed, sipping her espresso. "I am," Isabella said, and meant it. "It's been difficult, and there have been moments when I thought I'd lose myself completely. But I'm here. I'm whole. I'm happy." "The dreams?" Sofia asked. "Do you still have them?" "Sometimes, but they don't frighten me anymore. They're just part of who I am now." Isabella smiled. "Juliana and I have made peace with each other. She's not trying to take over, and I'm not trying to erase her. We're just coexisting. That's a kind of miracle in itself. This whole life is a kind of miracle." As Isabella walked home through Florence's ancient streets, past the Duomo's magnificent dome and across the Arno's ancient bridges, she felt Juliana's presence one more time. Not intrusive, not overwhelming, just a gentle whisper of gratitude and approval. The woman she had been had completed her journey. The promise had been kept, the love preserved, the circle closed. Now it was time for Isabella to live fully, to make her own choices, to write her own story even as she carried the echoes of another life within her. She was a woman who had died and been reborn, a woman who had crossed an ocean and transcended death, a woman who had learned that love was the most powerful force in existence, capable of miracles that defied explanation, of connections that spanned lifetimes, of transforming impossibilities into the most beautiful realities. And as she climbed the hill toward Villa Salvatore, toward the home where Lorenzo waited with Matteo, toward the life they had built from fragments of past and present, Isabella knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Some journeys take us across the world, others take us across lifetimes. The most extraordinary journeys do both, and teach us that home is not a place but a person, or in her case, two people who made her whole. The melody that had started everything still played in her heart, but now it was joined by new songs, new memories, new love, and that symphony of past and present, of Juliana and Isabella, of death transcended and life celebrated, would echo through the villa's halls for generations to come. In Florence, where art and history breathe in every stone, where past and present exist in eternal conversation, one more love story was added to the city's collection. A story of a waitress who hummed a melody that stopped time, of a mafia boss who dared to believe in miracles, and of a love that proved stronger than death itself.